listening to Living with ADHD and CPTSD, available on Apple and wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Living with ADHD and CPTSD. Today's CPTSD episode, we're going to talk about symptoms that we think are ADHD but could very well be CPTSD or childhood trauma symptoms. Now, I had an earlier episode a little while ago where I discussed that there's been a lot of research done and it's kind of, I guess you could say, in its infancy still, where people who are diagnosed with ADHD in their childhood are learning in their adult life at some point that their childhood trauma that they experienced, whether it was from parents or a loved one or a guardian, or even in school, from repeated abuse, neglect, emotional abuse, like all the things that are known to create complex trauma or CPTSD. They're starting to learn, and through the help of their therapist or even doing detailed research on their own, that a lot of the symptoms that they are experiencing that for the longest time they believed was ADHD related symptoms are actually more likely now from their trauma. And there are many, many different examples that can be discussed here. So before I get into it though, I do want to make people aware that it's still relatively new. This isn't something that every psychiatrist out there is aware of. It's not something that's changing the world when it comes to ADHD diagnosing and the relationship between ADHD and CPTSD. It's still new. So I don't want you to take the information that is being presented to you, whether it's today's episode or any other episode that is being done, or if there's anything else that you've seen online, whether it's a show, a video, a research paper, something that maybe somebody's been doing a theory on and a lot of research and is expressing their thoughts online. I don't want you to take it literally 100% and declare yourself that you don't have ADHD, that your issue is now CPTSD, and stop taking medication if you are on it, or looking for alternative ways to resolve your issues. What you need to do, and the best way to do this, and the safest and most likely way to get the proper help and understanding and correction on a diagnosis, is by talking to your therapist that you've been seeing for however long, or if you don't have a therapist, finding one that is well adapted and really understands and is well educated in both ADHD and complex trauma or CPTSD, and then talk to them about it. You can say that you heard on a podcast that there's research out there and evidence showing that there are people out there who were diagnosed with ADHD that have dealt with childhood trauma, and now their ADHD is actually because of their childhood trauma. And then you can get into the discussion, and then your therapist, who would be the best person to discuss it with, will be able to help you in determining properly and efficiently whether or not that is the case. And the reason I ask that and recommend it is because this is complicated. No pun intended with, complex PTSD here. But it's not a simple thing as just going, oh, I see. I had some trauma when I was a child. So yeah, now it's not ADHD. Now it's something else. I don't want you to think that it's that simple and you can just brush off, your past diagnosis. Because even though you may have experienced some trauma in your life, it does not automatically eliminate or make the ADHD diagnosis irrelevant or no longer important in your life. You shouldn't just dismiss it. Like, I know when I finally was, doing my research and the people that I talked to and all the information that I found, I know that really convinced me that it's very likely that my ADHD is actually developed from my childhood trauma in my earlier life, or like early life time. But I didn't automatically just say, okay, well, I don't have an ADHD diagnosis now. It's no longer ADHD. It's trauma. I didn't do that because there are still symptoms right now that are evident and that I'm experiencing on a regular basis that they're not really present when it comes to CPTSD. And I'm not saying that it's always the case. Like, it's still relatively new and fresh. And so when I am experiencing symptoms of like ADHD, like forgetting something and running around, having a hard time remembering where I put an item that I need right now, or having memory issues, or being impulsive, right? I'm not automatically dismissing it. I'm not sitting here going, okay, this is because of childhood trauma. I'm triggered, I'm blended with my system. I'm not going to that automatically and just dismissing the ADHD. I'm taking into account both issues, and I am trying to evaluate and sit with it for, however long it might take for me to get a better grasp of what is going on in the present moment. Because there are times in my day or whenever during the week where I'm by myself or I'm doing my work. I'm on the road, driving around and taking care of what I have to take care of. And I have an issue that comes up, and it's pretty obvious to me that what I'm experiencing in that moment is an ADHD issue that comes up. And there's no triggering. I'm not blended with my system. I'm not feeling scared. I'm not having a child part come online and take over. There's no signs of it. Now, I'm not saying it's 100% guaranteed, like for sure that is the case, but based on my experiences and understanding of what I'm going through and my knowledge in both CPTSD and ADHD, that I am having a moment where my ADHD is acting up. It could be because I didn't have a great sleep that night. I've been under a lot of pressure to get things organized. I only have so much time, to go to places and do work before I'm home. There's little things that get in the way, and things like being late to do work or running behind or having a lot to do is not triggering. It's not something that is scary or that I need protection from my parts for. It is a sign that my mind kind of functions in a different way than neurotypicals, and you don't always, I don't always communicate properly. I don't always think thoroughly when I'm expressing my opinions. I sometimes rush into stuff without taking a moment to sit back and really observe and really think about it and get a more objective point of view. That's a sign that I'm dealing with an ADHD moment. And I know that because I've had in my past for such a long time a lot of issues with focusing and concentration and getting distracted often, that is more often than not an ADHD moment. But the thing is, this is where it can get complicated and it can be confusing, or you just get to a point where you kind of get frustrated and overwhelmed and you just say to yourself, I don't know. I can't tell. I'm in the wrong place. I'm in the wrong state of mind. I can feel overwhelmed. Maybe I'm getting a little triggered. Maybe I'm feeling some anxiety. I'm having a bit of an attack here. And so it's not the right moment, and it's not the right feeling, like an internal feeling or mental situation to be able to properly assess that and to give a correct understanding and, profess that, okay, I had a trauma. I had a trigger, and I was experiencing a flashback, and I was blended, and that's why this was happening. Or I was having an ADHD moment and I got sidetracked. There's other examples that I could put in there, but that's the simplest way. So I'll go back to that. So sometimes, and depending on the severity of the complex trauma that is in your life, for mine, like I said, I gladly admit it's not a severe trauma. So I don't necessarily experience it the same way that one of you would, who maybe has a bit more severe forms of childhood trauma in their life. And the amount of triggers, the severity of the triggers that you experience are likely different than mine. So yeah, like I often find myself, and when I'm in a situation that is, let me put it this way, uncomfortable, overwhelming, I get a feeling in my body, almost like a sick feeling, or a very uncomfortable sensation that starts in the stomach and goes up through the chest, that it's so uncomfortable and so like chilling, I guess, if that's the word I want to use, that I feel like I can't concentrate. Like I'm too distracted to stay focused on what I'm currently working on, and it pulls me away. Like it's like when you're watching something or you're paying attention to something in front of you that's happening, like a TV show, or you're reading a book, or you're watching your kid or your partner or something, or you're cooking dinner, you're prepping dinner, and suddenly it's like your eyes pull out of focus. And I guess what I could say is like almost like as if you're focusing to your mind, like your eyes, instead of looking at what you're looking at, are coming back to you, and they're looking inside your head. I guess that's kind of how it feels, or how it would appear to someone who would be observing me. And my brain would automatically switch. And and for me, when I say automatic, I don't mean like instantaneous or in a split second. It takes a couple seconds to pull away, and it's like a slow transfer. And I go into my mind, and all of a sudden the thought or the work that I'm doing, because sometimes there isn't a thought necessarily as I'm doing that work, but the action that I'm taking right there, it slows down, or it kind of becomes hesitation, and it stops, it comes to a halt, and I may just kind of become still, like I'm not moving physically, or I might take a step back. I might sit down on whatever's near me. I might just stand up and kind of put my hands on my hips, or maybe I'll touch my forehead, or I'll scratch something, like some sort of physical movement or touching that is indicating a intense thought, or there's a feeling that is there. And so my brain has shifted. My mind has shifted from what I was doing to what has come into my head. And it's so big and it's so strong that if there's something going on, if somebody else is there, okay, like let's say there's a conversation, or there's a group, like 3 or 4 of us sitting around a fire or whatever, and I'm talking, and it's their turn to respond, or they start talking about something similar or maybe different or whatever. The thought or the feeling pops up, and it comes into my mind, and all of a sudden I'm quiet. I look like it could give the appearance as if I'm like collapsing into myself, and I look distracted, I look zoned out, I look like I'm super focused on what's going on in my head. And I have been told, and I don't know if this is every time, but I have been told that when this occurs, sometimes when they talk to me or when they're trying to get my attention, they have to try 2 or 3 times to kind of snap me out of that obsessed, intense thought process that's going on in my head. And my reaction is almost like a surprise action. Like nobody was there and somebody snuck up on me, right? And you go, oh, whoa, or oh, sorry, what? You're jumpy a bit, and you're kind of surprised, and your tone of voice goes up, and it could be defensive, possibly, depending on what you heard. It's likely that you've misunderstood something, because I know that that's happened to me a number of times, where I'm distracted suddenly because of a traumatic event or a trigger, and it's not necessarily a big trigger either. That's the thing, is it can be a small trigger, and so you get to the point where you're out of it, like you're not there, like physically you're there, obviously, but mentally you're not. And it takes nothing. That's the crazy part about all this, is it takes nothing for it to occur. It could be the slightest thing, and I will have been focused on whatever is going on, and suddenly I just get pulled away, and it just happens within that few seconds, and it can last. It depends. Like it could last 3-4 seconds. It could last 10-20 seconds. And the intensity can vary. There is no set sort of level of intensity when it occurs, but you do get literally pulled away, like as if you're just not there at all. There's no mental presence. There's no spiritually or anything. There's no presence for me. And because of that, and because of the level of the trauma and the shock, and a lot of times the anxious feelings, like the anxiety is there too, that if someone's been trying to get my attention and they're not succeeding, and they get to a point where they're kind of frustrated, or maybe their tone changes, and there's even a bit of anger because of that, and they call out to me and they finally get my attention, a number of things could occur. I could snap back and say, what? Or say something like, okay, whatever, or like, and or what I say has nothing to do with what was the initial attempt to talk to me about. And so they are like they're getting upset because it's like I have no desire to pay attention to them, or like I got bored with the conversation. That's what it appears to them. That's what their feeling is. And unless you've done a lot of work with your system and you're comfortable and you're able to try and regroup and get back in control, there's a possibility that you're going to respond in a way that indicates and shows them that you're triggered, because you're going to give a defensive response. You could give a childish, immature response, or rude comment, and then it could go from having the two of you or the three of you having a simple conversation where it's been a good, healthy, enjoyable talk, to one of them, maybe even both of them, being upset because they feel like you're not paying attention, or you're not interested, or you just don't care, or you're bored, all sorts of different reasons. And they don't understand, unless they know you well and they really understand, or they're very accepting of you, or maybe they're really nice and sweet and that doesn't affect them. There's that possibility that they're going to get cross with you, or they're going to feel like you are being rude and inconsiderate. If they don't understand that you're in the middle of a trigger, or something's caught, something has distracted you enough because it's a traumatic kind of event, whether it's big or small, they're not going to understand. And if your level of trust with that person isn't exactly at a high level, it's awful difficult to avoid having a negative occurrence or situation from happening. Like if you get triggered awful fast, and your response from a child part is to get defensive, or to get rude, or say something that is taken extremely wrong, it's gonna be something that will likely occur on a regular basis. You're gonna have problems where people are gonna mistake what is happening as lack of consideration, lack of compassion or understanding, or simply you just don't care. And if you're already triggered, it's extremely difficult to pull yourself in and regroup right away and be the adult and be in control and say to them, and this is assuming that they know who you are, or that they understand what you're going through. It will take a heck of a lot to just stop and go and regroup and go, oh, sorry guys, I think I was triggered there for a bit. Something that was said, or something I thought of in my head, had me kind of blended there, and I was distracted, and I was a little triggered. I'm really sorry, guys. Don't mind me, or maybe they're willing to wait a moment while you regroup and try to get back into the conversation. If that's something that you struggle with, and all you end up doing is becoming defensive, or saying something that's, like I said, is rude or short-tempered, they're going to, at some point, sooner or later, they're going to want to, close you off or exclude you from the rest of the conversation, and maybe even in future conversations, because if you don't really have it under control, and you're struggling to, be the one that's in charge when a trigger happens, or when you're feeling any kind of a overwhelming feeling, or stress, or high anxious feelings, and you're getting distracted because of it. it's going to make it difficult for you to be a part of any kind of conversation or any part of activity, because you won't feel capable, or you won't trust yourself that you'll be able to behave in a way that is proper or accepted. And at the same time, the person that you're with, and it could even be someone that you're in a relationship with, like your significant other, they might at some point get to a state where they're hesitating to include you or want to be with you in moments because they don't know, they can't trust whether or not you're going to be able to always be the adult and not let something small or a possible triggering situation make you, not able to stay unblended and possibly, cause issues wherever you are or whatever you might be doing together. It can be detrimental to relationships or to friendships. And it can definitely be detrimental if in a professional environment as well, because if you've been struggling with traumatic events and triggers and your flashbacks, and you're expected to work, do your job, and it's a busy kind of work environment where you're expected to handle a lot of work and a lot of heavy load, and this is a kind of an environment where there's a lot of different clients and paperwork all the time, and there's a lot expected of you, and you're going to have, let's say you have a lot of one-on-one meetings with clients or other coworkers on a regular basis. It would make it very difficult to be able to perform in a proper manner all the time, and to avoid having a trigger and allowing your trigger-like behavior from your child parts to come out and get in the way of your work and maintaining professional behavior in that kind of environment. Like you're working, if you're working for a place that requires professionalism and using proper technical standards and business standards and personal one-on-one kind of standards, whether it's for meetings or like doing a presentation, if you're not able to handle that because things that are in that environment are causing you to get triggered and be blended with your system, it's going to make it awful difficult to maintain that kind of employment, because you need to be capable of being in an adult situation and not be triggered when you're needed, the most, when it's most necessary to be an adult. Your bottom line is you've got to be able to understand what's happening, and you got to be in control. You've got to be doing your work. You got to be moving towards healing and seeing a great deal of improvement with your CPTSD before really taking any kind of serious step forward, whether it is in work or being in a serious relationship, especially if the idea is to get married and start a family. So yeah, it can be awful difficult for everybody, especially your partner. The last thing I think that you would really want to do is bring a child into this life when you haven't really healed from your own complex trauma, because there's a good chance you're going to put that on that child, and you don't want that. You really don't want that. That would be unfair to him or her, that child, and it would definitely be unfair to you and your partner. So to go back to the ADHD or CPTSD thing, your trauma can definitely cause, if it's the right situation, it can cause your ADHD symptoms. Knowing whether it is ADHD or CPTSD, as I was saying earlier, is not a simple thing. You just can't, go to someone and they'll be able to know, unless they have a deep history of your work that you've done, that you've had a lot of therapy with that person, and there's a very thorough and strong understanding of your background and what you've experienced. It's going to be extremely difficult to know, to be able to determine where you are, if it's a CPTSD diagnosis or if you do actually have ADHD. I guess the only way, I shouldn't say the only way. There are ways to, assuming that you have a good understanding of both and you have a lot of experience in healing, ways that you can tell is how, like, the behaviors that appear when issues are occurring. If you think it's an ADHD symptom, you should be capable, assuming that you've done your therapy and you've got a lot of experience with yourself, if you're on medication, or like your adaptations or the tools that you use to help combat ADHD. If you have a symptom and something goes wrong and you're experiencing some anxious feelings, or you're feeling like you're lost or something, if the behavior, like if you're able to be aware of what's happening, like, and I mean everything, like you're aware of your current behavior, your current state of mind, you're aware of the fact that you're missing something, there's something went wrong, that other people are talking to you and you're not attacking, or you're not being defensive, there's no childlike symptoms or behaviors that are kind of coming out. If that isn't happening, then you can lean more towards it being an ADHD symptom or an attack, like you're having an ADHD moment. Now, if you're feeling similar symptoms and you suddenly are lost in thought, or you suddenly kind of come back and you're going, whoa, what happened here? Or you're feeling super anxious and you're really overwhelmed, and the partner you're with or your friend that you're with is trying to bring you back or trying to console you, and your responses are childlike, or you're getting really defensive, or you're saying things that are just not something that that you would say if you were in a good state and you're grounded. If you're saying things that they kind of go, huh? Or why would you say that? That was hurtful. Or like, I'm just trying to help you, and you get more defensive. There's now you're leaning more towards you're in a triggered state, and you're not having ADHD. Now, here's this, like I said, it's not a simple thing to determine. It can take a long time, possibly years of therapy, both ADHD or complex trauma type therapy. It can take a while for you to be able to break down the different situations and get deep into your mind and learn about your unique situation and learn about your symptoms. It's going to take some time for you to really understand and know if you're ADHD, or if the actual ADHD is really something from a trauma, like a childhood trauma that you've experienced in your past. That's really the only true way to know, is getting help, whether it's the psychiatrist or a psychologist. They're similar, obviously. If you're able to get that kind of assistance and they can help you determine, that truly is the best way to do it. For someone who's done a lot of lot of healing work with CPTSD, it will likely be a lot easier for you to know, because you're going to have so much experience working with your system and working with the trauma and understanding your triggers and what triggers you, that it won't take long for you to know. But I would think that if you're already that deep into it, you're going to know. You're already going to know ahead of time. You're not going to be wondering if it's ADHD or CPTSD. This tends to be really more for people who are very, very new or in the infancy of their diagnosis. And like for most adults who have ADHD, if they were diagnosed as a child, then it can be easier to try and help figure that out, because there's a lot of instances and examples that you can go back on that, if you're willing to go through the work, that you can discover and examine, and you have a much better chance of determining that. If you are diagnosed as an adult, especially if it's in your later adult years, like 40s or 50s, and you're diagnosed as an ADHD, whether it's hyperactive or inattentive, it can be more difficult to truly determine that, to see if your ADHD is result of trauma. But that's where going to therapy and really working on it is going to be helpful. Without that, it's very difficult. And I definitely recommend the therapy no matter what, just because then that'll help you to find out if it is ADHD or CPTSD. All right, everybody, that's it for today's episode. I really hope this was an informative episode. If you really enjoyed it and you found it extremely helpful and beneficial, and if you've checked out my other podcasts and you like those too, then I would recommend becoming a subscriber through Apple Podcasts. It's a monthly amount. It's really inexpensive, and you gain early access to all the new episodes. Plus, you gain exclusive access to bonus material that is only available to subscribers. If you want to get in touch with me, if you have any comments, suggestions, or concerns, or if you want to even be a guest on my show, then there's a number of ways to get a hold of me. You can contact me through Twitter. It's at ADHD and CPTSD. You can email me. The email address is livingwithadhdandcptsd@gmail.com. And you can also check out my website. There's a lot of information on there as well. It's livingwithadhdandcptsd.ca. And you can also donate if you feel that it would be something that, if you're really passionate about the show and you think that you'd like to help me out when it comes to helping me continue making my podcasts, then you can go to ko-fi.com. That's ko-fi.com/livingwithadhdand CPTSD. And then you can donate a one-time amount of any type, or you can do monthly rates. Well, all right, that's it for today. I hope you had a good time and you really got a lot out of this. So I shall talk to you later. All right, bye for now.